Welcome to the March Pen Parentis Literary Salon. It is the theme this month is identity. We have Bryan Van Dyke, Dylan Landis, and Angela Himsel. And so I wanted to welcome everybody who is watching live, and I also want to welcome everybody who is watching in the playback. We are so glad you came, and we hope that you do the whole like and the YouTube thing. Yay, like, and do the comments and subscribe. All that stuff. But we really can see your comments. So if you are logged in to either Facebook or YouTube and you write us a comment, we actually can see them. So it would be really cool if you would drop us a note and tell us where you're watching from right at this very second. And then we can make sure that that is actually working. Of course, this is I almost said co-star. This is my co-star, Christina Chu. Starring Christina Chu with co-star, special guest friend Milda DeVoe. Hi, Michelle DeMarco. Thanks for stopping in. See, we can see you. You are seen. I do want to say, since we're waiting just a few more minutes to make sure that everybody gets logged in, I do want to say that our fellowship is open right now. So if you have a child under 10 years old, this is a fellowship that we give every year for new parents. So your kid it's up until age 10. So if your kid is under 10 years old, or you have at least one child is under 10, we do have a writing fellowship for new parents. It has a very tiny word count that we change every year because our goal is to get you to write again after you have a kid. So if you don't mind, you can look at the guidelines on our website at penparentis.org and hopefully apply. And maybe you'll win. The winner gets $1,000, which doesn't suck. And they also get a year of mentorship. They get a title membership, and if you don't already have one, and they get published by Dreamers Creative Writing Magazine. It's a really great. We take care of you. I don't know how to say that better than that, but we really care about our fellows. We really want our fellows to succeed. Our current fellow is Dawn Ryan. She's fantastic. You can actually see her story. We have links to it up on the website, and you will be knocked dead. It is so amazing. I also want to do a quick thank you to all of our funders and to our sponsor. This event was funded in part by poets and writers through public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. We also want to especially thank Marilyn, Tara, Mercedes, Rita, and JP, and all of our title members and our wonderful board for their generous donations for tonight. And now Christina will properly introduce our authors as I bring them all up for you to meet. Go ahead, Christina, take it away. Co-star.
Hi, I'm Christina, and I arranged to have this salon about identity. And I think one thing that many people automatically assume when we talk about identity is that it's about race. And I'm not saying it's not. In fact, I think the two are inseparable. And so Pen Parentis will be dedicating a salon specifically to identity and race next season. For tonight, however, I thought we could rewind 5 years. And when, remember the time when someone would ask about you and you would say, hi, I'm Christina, I'm an author. Remember that? That was like not so long ago, actually. And I thought, it would be nice to take a moment to remember that we're so much more than just race, right? We're just so complex and we're so rich and we have our histories and our stories, and it's the things we do and love, the memories and all the other things that, that these fabulous authors will be talking and reading about that make us who we are. My favorite designer, Helmut Lang, once said, if you really have your own identity, you'll keep on doing what you think is really right for you. And you'll also understand the next step you want to take. So let me please introduce our three incredible authors. Our first author tonight will be Angela Himsel. She's the author of A River Could Be a Tree. She's the mother of 3 and recently a grandmother as well. Hi, Angela!
Hey.
That's impossible. Completely impossible. Can we bring them? Should we bring them all up?
And yes, I'm just going to introduce them just short.
Yeah.
Our next author is Bryan Van Dyke. He's the author of Little Mr. Destiny and Only the Trying. He's the father of 2, and he also happens to be a fellow Columbia Peep.
Hey, hey Peep.
And finally, Mom Dylan Landis. She's the author of Normal People Don't Live Like This, Rainy Royale, and 6 books on decorating. Everyone, welcome Dylan.
Thank you.
Wow. 6 books on decorating.
6 books. 6. Okay. Count them.
That's a lot of them. All right. So what are we doing tonight? So tonight we're going to talk about identity. We're going to hear readings by each of the 3 authors, and then we're going to have a Q&A and a discussion, and anybody who's out there in viewer land is welcome to comment their question, and we will ask our 3 authors the question or just start the discussion and see what happens. But let us begin our readings. Who's first? Christina.
Angela Himsel will be reading first. Angela's Himsel's memoir, A River Could Be a Tree, received the New York City Big Book Award for Memoir in 2019. Her writing's been published in the New York Times, The Jewish Week, The Forward Lilith Book, The Partisan Review, Bomb, and online at beliefnet.com, Ducks.org, and Dame Magazine. Angela has 3 grown children and a cute little guy.
Very cool.
Angela, thanks for being with us tonight.
Yay! Thank you. Ready? Here we go.
Ready? Okay.
Yay!
Thanks. I'm going to read from my memoir. It's called A River Could Be a Tree. And it's about growing up in a fundamentalist Christian faith in southern Indiana and ultimately converting to Judaism. I'm going to read a section from 1980. Home from Indiana University one autumn weekend in 1980, I went to church on Saturday morning with my family. Without a welcoming smile, without even a good morning, brethren, the minister launched into, brethren, Satan has been allowed a foothold in this church and Satan has got to be rooted out. Even though I was 19 years old and I no longer viewed Satan as I had as a child, a frightening invisible personage, but rather as an evil energy, the minister made it sound as if Satan was actually sitting with us right there and needed to be forcibly removed. Again, just like in the Garden of Eden, he continued, it's women who are leading the church away from God with their makeup. What? I hadn't been prepared for this at all. Satan was me and all of the other women wearing eyeshadow? Wake up. If you let makeup come between you and God, then I'm here to tell you, you will not make it into the kingdom. Women, our apostle, Herbert Armstrong, is telling you through Jesus, it's because of you that Jesus cannot return. Your makeup is an abomination. Throw it out, he screamed, as if my Bon Bell lip gloss were a bomb ready to detonate and blow up the entire world. His words were incomprehensible despite being blunt and clear. My lipstick was wreaking havoc in the church. Jesus was loitering on the sidelines, refusing to return until I soaked a cotton ball in baby oil and wiped off my mascara. In the complete and total silence that followed, a woman cried ever so quietly. Do you think women think you can improve on God's work? The minister finished triumphantly. I knew I could, was my first thought. I had white eyelashes, white eyebrows, and pale skin. Makeup wasn't a luxury. It was as much a necessity as brushing my teeth. Without mascara, eyebrow pencil, eyeliner, lipstick, and a little blush, I looked like a white rodent with beady blue eyes. Makeup drew my features into definition. My eyes popped open, my lips became visible, and perhaps, as a result, my frowning visage and my opinionated voice did not fade away into the anemic world of dutiful women. This makeup edict truly gave me pause. It seemed stupid and petty, if not ludicrous. Having spent over a year at Indiana University, I was far less willing to blindly obey the church's rules, though I worried that this was a sign that I'd let the devil into my life. In college, my feminist friends talked about female subjugation at the hands of organized religion, using words like misogyny. I had to look that one up. I thought it might be a medical term related to gynecology. In the weeks after the reinstated makeup ban, the other women, including my younger sister Liz, who was inordinately fond of red nail polish and lipstick, went to church with no color to adorn their faces. I refused. Even though the week before they'd worn as much or more makeup as I, they looked to me as if I had turned into a whore. My father made certain I heard many times that Jezebel had worn eye makeup, and look what happened to her. Pushed out a window and killed. Even then, death seemed like a harsh punishment for wearing eyeliner. Later, when I studied the story academically, I learned that while the church had created a cause and effect, wearing makeup would kill a woman. The kohl that rimmed Jezebel's eyes indicated that she was a priestess of the Phoenician god, a Phoenician princess. Jezebel was not loyal to her husband, King Ahab's god, the god of the Bible. Not that I wanted to go to my death because of makeup, but the other women in church seemed diminished, and I, who would rather go commando to church before giving up my mascara, felt embarrassed for them. At the same time, I worried that these women, unlike me, were capable of putting aside their own carnal desires and needs to follow Jesus unconditionally. I didn't know which was worse, getting the Holy Spirit and becoming like them, pale, washed out, and obedient, or not getting it, remaining willful, and not making it into the kingdom. Thank you.
Yay!
Thank you, Angela. That was wonderful.
Wow. So it's about your conversion to Judaism, is that correct?
In part. It's really about the way I grew up, and then kind of the, I guess, you know, when you're young, 19 is young, you're really trying out new selves, I think. And I was thinking about that in terms of identity, that we're all kind of trying out new selves when we're young. And eventually, hopefully, we find a self that fits us.
When did you decide that that self wasn't you?
That the Christian self wasn't me? I mean, you know, there's a lot of catalysts in life. You know, this was one of the catalysts when they tried to take away something that I just thought was stupid. And I know it sounds incredibly superficial, and it is, by the way, but I also feel like it's, usually these things are always indicative of something bigger, which was, this is my choice as a woman. I have a choice to make these, you know, might not like all my makeup, but it's still my decision. And I think that it indicated to me that it was just more of the same, telling women what to do with their bodies, really.
Fascinating. Oh, I cannot wait to get into this discussion. I'm already itching to do it. Like, okay, we got to hear more readings.
Great. Okay, so our next reader is Bryan Van Dyke. He's the author of Little Mr. Destiny, a short novel about a boy who sees the eventual death of anyone he touches, as well as Only the Trying, an essay on the nature of illness and recovery. His writing appears in The Millions, Southeast Review, Pacific Standard, and the New Delta Review. His short stories have appeared in Carve and The Rumpus. In 2013, he was an artist in residence at Catwalk Art Residency. And for the last 13 years, he's curated Columbia University's reading series for emerging writers. He too is a graduate of Columbia University and Northwestern. He lives in New York with his wife and 2 children.
Yay!
Bryan!
All right. I'm going to read from Little Mr. Destiny. I'm going to read a section that's a little bit into it. These are short, but this is a moment where the narrator really discovers his not so great capabilities and abilities. The plan was for me to spend much of each day across the street at the house of old Marion Renebroyd. She had a corgi in a woodsy backyard with a pond, more than enough to keep me happy. My mom worked at the church 4 days a week, and I went over to Marion's house late in the morning on those days. Usually I walked across the street and knocked on her door, and that was that. One morning I rang the doorbell and heard the corgi barking inside, but no one came to the door. I waited, rang again, no footsteps, more barking. I looked back at my mother and raised both hands as if to say, "What now?" She cupped her hands over the picture window beside the door and peered inside. "I see that dog," she said. "Marion," she called out. "Marion, it's Lynn. Are you in there?" I ended up going with my mother to the church that day. She had all the pastor's handwritten notes, and she was typing up his sermon on the electric typewriter. I asked if I could help. She said Pastor Ivor was a fussy man and I made too many mistakes to be helpful. The church had a meeting of the elders that night, and my mom had to help with coffee and typewritten agendas and the AV system, and so we got home late, near dark. All the lights were off in the Rennerboyd house except one in the back. I hope she's not sick, my mom said, but this was the only reasonable explanation. After dinner, I asked my mom if I could bring a covered plate over. I wanted to make sure Marion got better so that I wouldn't need to go to the church again. I rang the doorbell and I heard the corgi barking, its toenails clacking on the floor, but no one answered. Setting the plate down, I went around to the back of the house. The back entrance was a sliding glass door. The corgi stood inside the door, watching me. When I came nearer, it ran inside a little, then came back to the door, which I realized was ajar. I wouldn't have entered the house except for the dog. It was urging me in. The interior of the house smelled of lemon cleaner, and under that, something faintly decrepit. I thought of Marion as very old, but she was perhaps only a year or two over 50. She had never married and had lived in this house since she was a girl. She had a younger sister who was married and had kids who visited on holidays, but otherwise, she was alone. I did not turn on the lights, didn't need to. There was still some light coming from the dusky sky through the windows. I went into the TV room, but no one was there. I went into her bedroom and found just her neatly made bed. No one in the kitchen, no one in the pantry, no one in the sitting room. I was avoiding the bathroom, the room with the light on. Finally, there was nowhere else to look. I peeked around the corner first, not a whole look, but enough to know she was there, on the floor. Please, God, don't let her be dead. I edged into the bathroom. She was lying face down on the pink tile, sprawled out, half in the tub, half not. No blood. She wasn't wearing clothes, which made me embarrassed as well as scared. Her left leg was turned wrong. She's dead, I thought. The urge to run, to go home, to get my mother, to get anyone, was strong. But when I turned to flee, the corgi was there, looking up at me, watchful, waiting. You have to help, its large eyes said. And so I obeyed. I went closer, knelt down. I touched Marion. I put my hand on her bare back to feel if she was breathing, completely forgetting what this would do. Immediately I shuddered, and there she was, not on the pink tile floor, but in a blue bedroom, in a bed, with a view of the ocean. And she was much older, and peaceful, and at ease. And beside her was her sister, whom I recognized from her visits, and her sister's children, who looked much older, who had become adults. And there was a man I didn't know, a man with age lines and thin hair, who was holding her arm. And although he looked sad, he also looked happy. Happy to have made it there, happy to have found her, happy to have had her for as long as he did. Marion opened her eyes in the bathroom and moaned a little, looking at me. And that's when I understood what was happening when I had these visions. I understood that I was seeing the end of things, the last place for the people that I touched. Marion wasn't dying yet, not for a long time. She still had to fall in love. She still had to find the man who would be there with her until the end. I slipped, she said weakly, the shower. Hold on, I said. I'll get my mom. Then I ran, hard as I could, out of that dark house and into the darkening night, ran so hard that you'd think the devil himself had told me to get home before sundown, or he'd come for me next. Thanks.
Yay! That is so creepy. Like, what a that's the superpower that you never want to have.
That's what I started with for this, basically. What don't I want?
What don't I want? Nice.
That moment where that dog is like, just like do something, right? It's so incredible because I was actually like, oh yeah, the dog would definitely do that.
Obviously, I have a dog, right? That's how you know.
Down to the dog, the reality.
They know more than you think. All right, so let's get to our final reader.
We can talk.
Have our conversation. Our final reader tonight is Dylan Landis. She's the author of a linked story collection, Normal People Don't Live Like This, and a novel linked to it called Rainy Royale. Her stories have run in Tin House, Bomb, the O. Henry Prize Stories, and Best American Reading, Non-Required Reading. And her personal essays appeared in Harper's, the New York Times Book Review, and the anthology, What My Mother and I Don't Talk About.
I love these people's bios.
I know.
The bios are like a 10-minute reading. Like,
wait, I'm not done. She's won a fellowship in fiction from the National Endowment for the Arts, has covered medicine for the New Orleans Times-Picayune, interior design for Chicago Tribune, and has written 6 books on decorating. She's a mom who lives in New York City. Yay!
Yay, Dylan.
Thanks very much, Christina. So I'm not going to read from Rainy Royal. I am reading from a novel in progress, which I've never done before. So,
Yay! We love novels in progress.
And this is the opening couple of pages. This is chapter 1, set in August 1991. It ends like this. In darkness, radio silenced and headlights cut, a woman inches her car along the street where the enemy lives. She wears a black cashmere hooded sweatshirt unzipped to a deep cleavage and black jeans with black cotton gloves tucked into her pockets. A daughter who is 11 sits beside her silently, sneaker toes tapping the floor mat, jittery. Across from the enemy's house, the woman brakes and idles the Camry. Peering through the passenger window, she scrutinizes the house for signs of life. The hood of her sweatshirt falls, as it has been doing all night, and absently she draws it back up over coils of honey brown hair. It is 2.5 hours past midnight. Look sharp, pussycat, the woman says. She fluffs the hair of the girl sitting shotgun, a girl who next month will start 8th grade and turn 12. The girl looks sharp. It isn't hard. The full moon is a flashlight on the enemy's ravaged front yard. The enemy's lawn looks so abandoned and brown that when the enemy is at work, people let their dogs run deep into the property. A payday wrapper sticks from a hydrangea bush that has crisped and turned to lace. Over the arched doorway, bougainvillea vines dangle their dead blossoms like sleeping bats. We're saving our own lives here, the woman says in a hushed voice. The girl rests her chin on her folded hands in the open passenger window. Her seatbelt is clicked shut behind her back so the car won't beep while they drive. At least once a minute, she starts to snap her gum and remembers not to. She's in black jeans too, and her black sweatshirt says, "Kinda care" on the front and "kinda don't" on the back. Her personal feeling is that maybe her mother is kinda kidding about mission number 4, and soon she will roll out that enveloping plaid blanket of a laugh of hers, and they can go get an all-night omelet at Norm's. But maybe she is kinda not. The enemy lives in a modest Spanish-style casita in the back end of Santa Monica at the edge of Sunset Park. In fact, as far from the ocean as one can get without tumbling into Mar Vista, which has neither Mar nor Vista. The casita ducks under a low red tile roof. It's too humble for a colonnade or a second floor or even one of those baby turrets. Conveniently for the mother, it's tucked in a pocket of darkness halfway between 2 streetlights. The sex bomb is gone, the mother says, and the girl looks up the empty driveway for the white convertible BMW that matches her father's exactly. She knows that if the mother could shepherd 2 daughters and their friends and the groceries in a sex bomb, she would be driving a sex bomb. She's away, the mother says. You know what that means? She can't get hurt? Exactly. And, the mother says triumphantly, just imagine the look on her face when she gets back. That's it.
Yay!
So,
Kinda
Dylan,
awesome.
so when did you start working on this? Is this
About a year ago, I began working on this chapter. I think I spent 9 months on it, just getting the voice right. And I remember Zadie Smith writing or saying somewhere that she would spend 2 years on her first 50 pages. And that enabled her to find her voice for the book. And then she could write the rest of the book in something like a year or 2 years. And I thought, okay, well, if she can do that, I'm allowed to spend all this time finding the voice and finding the voice and finding the voice. So I just wrote and wrote that chapter over and over and over again until I got the voice I needed. And then I started writing more chapters more quickly. which is not to say that I have anything remotely like a manuscript yet. I'm just
We're so flattered that
thrashing around.
that you're premiering it here. I love it when authors premiere like unpublished
that's
work.
nice. Why?
Well, I feel like it means that they trust us in a way,
Mhm.
like, and that they know that our audiences are kind. You know what? I just think it's cool and brave. Like it's always brave
It's a little
to premiere
scary.
something that's not actually published.
Yeah.
You know.
And of course, we get to say when it comes out, she read it here first.
Yeah, when you win the National Book Award for this part, we'll be like, well, that was premiered on our, True.
That's nice.
Okay, we got to talk identity. Are you excited?
Yes.
I'm so excited. There's so much. There's so many ways to begin to get at this. Like even backstage when Bryan and I were discussing about the space and the not space and the letters and then like the different ways that somebody can screw up your name. Like even like what do you use as your author name is such a dilemma in this time of branded everything. Like, and are you your brand? You guys all, I mean, you're all established authors. I mean, Dylan, you've got 6 books out that are in like design and you're a novelist. So
that's a whole separate identity.
See, how does that work?
But
Tell us how that works.
Well, I used to be a journalist.
Okay.
And then I became a freelance journalist. So I was doing magazine work, and I had been given a beat at the Chicago Tribune. I didn't ask for it. I didn't even want it at the time, but I fell in love with it, which was
I think you just heard the pain in all of the journalists out there that are like, what? You didn't want it.
I didn't want that beat. And it was talk about a gift horse. It turned out to be a blessing. I fell in love with that beat. I wanted to cover news, but not to go off to that huge digression. It became an identity that I fell in love with. I defined myself by it. I started a group of contributing editors who met once a month for 5 years, all of us who worked for design magazines. And it really defined me for a long time. And then when I started writing fiction, it was like a winter coat that I took off and put back in the closet and didn't really put on again ever, except that there's decorating in every single book that I write. Every story that I write, in some way, there's decorating in it.
Oh, that's neat.
I noticed that mannequin in the photo behind you before. Were you in like interior design?
It was interior design, yeah.
Wonderful. Wow.
I wonder how frequently we're allowed to totally change our identity. Like,
I have a question.
Yeah.
It occurred to me when you said that about pseudonyms. So something that I've been so fascinated by, and I don't feel like anybody has really talked about it, is that Stacey Abrams is a romance writer. You know? I mean, I find that so fascinating and so interesting and she does it under a pseudonym, and she's been doing it for a long time, and it's a well-known secret. It's not really a secret, and she's come out about it. And I think about it, like this woman has like multiple identities as a politician, as a Black woman, as a romance writer, as all of those things. It's pretty, and Christina, to your point, we're all multifaceted, and we should be multifaceted.
And what's interesting is that pre-internet, it was easy to have multiple identities.
Exactly.
Now, in the age of Google, it is extremely hard to have multiple identities because everybody knows everything all the time. And well, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when I first put up my very first website, there was a real like decision-making process, like, what is the identity that I put here, and how much, I did many things. And like, do you put all of the things that you do on your website? Do you stratify it? Do you have 3 different websites?
Right.
Do you have, like, I'm sure Dylan, you went through this. Did you have to totally redo your whole entire website when you decided that when you published
there was no email back when this happened.
Right.
So it wasn't an issue. But I also make art.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have I'm really not online very much at all, but I have an Instagram page for myself as a writer, and I have an Instagram page for myself as an artist, and they're very different. And I don't really go to either one very much, but
Well, see, and I wonder about that.
obviously
Like
true.
if it's a new person, like a young person today, they would start an Instagram that has writing and the art in the
Together.
same Instagram. Yeah. Because it's all that. Like they'll do the knitting and the mystery solving and the whatever Pokemon playing. Like it would be all in the same feed. And I don't know how, I don't like, that's cool that works for people. And then their audiences just overlap. Like,
I mean, there was a time when I had 2 Twitter accounts that I set up because, you know, and I think it's especially true if, you know, let's say you're a writer or writing is your core thing you want to do, but you also would like to, let's say, pay your rent. And so,
what a funny little thing. Yeah.
And for me, you know, I had a career decision that I made very early on to get a job, you know, building websites and digital marketing. And it was very much like having 2 personalities to the point that I did have 2 Twitter accounts, you know, one which was all about digital marketing trends and digital strategy, because that was what I put on my resume. And that was what
business account.
Yeah. Business. That was the business up version. And then there was the literature one. And I did maintain that for a long time, but I will tell you that the business one is dead. And only the literature one survived. You know.
That's funny. But the rent got paid during that, so that's good.
In theory.
What I find really fascinating, especially with writers, is that I think this is true with actors as well sometimes, but not only do we have our real life identities, but we actually have our protagonists and our characters' identities. And you know, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm working on a character, I'm trying to find the voice and trying to actually establish what's happening with this person, right? Like I really try to be that person. I try to be there as that person. So it's so interesting, right? Like having your inner identities, having your external identities, right?
Christina, have you ever kept a journal or a travelogue in the persona, like as if it were written by one of your characters?
No, but I should.
That's pretty cool.
I'm just curious.
Do you do that, Dylan?
I've done it, but I've never heard anyone else say that they try to live as their character or experience things. You're just the first person who's ever voiced that I've heard. So
well, that's good. No, I think actually a lot of people kind of, it's very similar to method acting, I guess. It's like you really try to understand their motivations and why they would choose one thing over another, and you know why they
need to get into their heads, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think writers just call it getting into their heads. They don't necessarily live it the way a method actor would live that character for the time. What were you going to say, Bryan?
I was going to say, Christina, like, are there things that you've done that Christina wouldn't have done, but that the character made you do? And if so, do we need a separate stream to talk about some of these things?
I think that needs to be on the separate Twitter account. You read Beauty? Because
no, yeah. So there were times when the character went places I was like, really? Like, we're really gonna go there? You know? But I think that was part of why I feel like it's so important to actually understand and know your character, right? And really be able to have your voice. It's just that, you know, if you're gonna do it, you got to do it. You've got to be there for them. And yeah, you not feel comfortable sometimes, but it's just not about you as the writer. It's about the character for me.
Right. Except for Angela, it was about her because it's a memoir. So Angela, when you were writing it, and I know that a lot of the people that are doing meetups with us get into a spot where there's a chapter that's extremely hard and they get super stuck in like getting past a place that is like either extremely painful or just a subject that's very uncomfortable and not fun to write about. Did you ever have that while you were writing your memoir where you got to like the chapter where you're just like, oh, I don't want to do this? And how did you get through that?
Well, you know, it really took me a lot of years actually to write this memoir, I have to say. And I think that, like, maybe for some of us, I mean, Dylan, you've written a lot of different genres, and Bryan also, you've written essays and that sort of thing. And sometimes you have to figure out, is this a novel? Is this an essay? Is this
Right.
is this fiction? What is this? And I tried to wedge my experiences into fiction because I thought that it would do exactly what you're saying, which was give me more leeway so that I could play with it a little bit more, and I didn't have to tell the truth, because the truth is kind of painful. You know, you're beholden to, as a memoirist, to say this happened, this did. I'm not making this up. So I tried to make it a novel for a long time, and it did not want to be a novel. And then it became a memoir very reluctantly. And then it was quite challenging, I have to say, to go through and to be true to my experience without it being, because I'm not a victim kind of a person. So it's not about victimization. It's not about that. It's really about identity, who you are and who others view you are as, and who others want you to be, but you don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
So I think that identity is just so multifaceted, as we've been talking about who you are, who others think you are. Do they get to tell you who you are, or do you get to tell everybody else who you are? And what do you do when other people say, no, you're really not that person?
That's what I was going to ask. I was going to ask, like, do you get to say, who gets the final word? Like, you can stand up and say, this is who I am, and I am this person, and all the people can be like, yeah, you're not, you're totally deluded, you have no idea, you know? And it's like, where does the truth, like, how do you know where the truth in that is?
You know, when I was working on my memoir, I have to say that one of the things I didn't realize that I was writing about, but I came to write about, is that I really thought about America as a country, because we are actually the only country, I think, that can really even talk about identity, you know, because we are all hyphenated in some way or the other. And I think that it's interesting that, you know, who gets to tell you who you are? Well, if you live in Italy, you're Italian for 2,000 years, you don't have any issues with your ethnic or, you know, whatever identity. But in America, our identity is just so complicated. And we also are always in flux, kind of, right? We just, you know, who I was 20 years ago, maybe I'll change my mind, maybe I won't, but I'm entitled to because I'm an American, you know, that kind of thing.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you look at photos when you're younger and you're like, wow.
I used to say that to my kids. I used to say, like, aren't you glad you, like, I would ask them at this age, like, you're 6, so what tattoo would you get? And then when they were 8, I'd be like, you know, when you were 6, you wanted to get this tattoo. And they would be like, oh, I'm like, so don't get one yet.
Right.
Because you might change your mind.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's a very interesting question. And Angela, it was very funny when you said 19, and in the grand scheme of things, 19 was very young.
Right.
But in today's world, 19 is like a young woman who knows what she wants and is absolutely an adult, and they will tell you so. And my son is 18, and he has announced that I was a good mom. Thanks. He's done now.
Right. So. Bryan, I have to say that when Bryan was talking about the woman who's 50 or 51, she's old, I was like, another form of identity is the whole ageism. It's like, you know, when you're 18 and you find out that somebody got pregnant when they were 35, it's like, oh my God, they're having sex? I thought they stopped already. Jeez. You know? It's like 51, my God, she's practically, you know, she should be getting a burial plot soon.
Right. I've asked my kids before if I'm old, right? Because, you know, my presumption is they probably think I am. And happily, they've told me that your mid-40s is not yet old. I'm apparently just, you know, I'm still, but I think they're just too young. Now, I have a 13-year-old, so I haven't asked that question recently. Well, maybe
they might be just very kind.
Well, my children are also, they're adept at knowing how to handle it.
What was the next word out of their mouths? And can I have $5 for?
Yes.
So one thing that I think is really interesting, I know Angela's like, she read from her memoir, but she's working on a novel. And what's interesting is her first book is about growing up in this church, and the novels that her memoir and her novel is about Judaism. So
Right.
there's how much of you all like, and this, I really mean this question for all of you, how much of your real life gets used as fodder for your work? Angela, why don't you start since
Well, unfortunately, or whatever, mine does, and I don't mean it that way, because I always wanted to, seriously, I just wanted to be a fiction writer. That's it. Like, no interest in memoir, nonfiction, nothing like that. I was always reading, the Five Little Peppers and how they grew and right, exactly. I was all into like books that would take me away from my world. So I wasn't interested in my world. And unfortunately, I guess, or whatever, I'm probably not as good of a fiction writer. I'm guessing that's actually the right answer, by the way. That maybe I'm a better nonfiction.
Angela, there's an interesting point, is that, so your nonfiction is so, I mean, to like growing up in a cultish kind of Christian fundamentalist, like,
right,
that's like a horror story setting,
right.
That's traditionally like, it's outsider, like, ooh.
Yeah.
And if you turned it into fiction, then you run there's a threat that you're gonna like exploit people, or do it doesn't feel as authentic as if you're like, no, I grew up here, this is my story, I'm telling it, it's going to be from my point of view, here it is, this is me, But the minute you turn it into fiction, then people are like, well, wait, why did you use that? Like, how much is that yours? And people start asking you, like, is that yours to use? Is that your story to tell? Can you tell that story?
But I want to be Bryan. I want to write stories about people who like
have superpowers.
I want to leave myself totally behind.
You're allowed to do that.
Why?
Because I love fiction. I mean, I grew up like, I guess a lot of writers, like, didn't we read the Hardy Boys or whatever the heck we read growing up? And it's total like fantasy. It's just takes you away. You can just kind of burrow your way into that book. But it was fiction I was reading. I wasn't reading nonfiction. My God, that's like newspapers. Ooh. So I was reading fiction. So I always liked this idea of like another world, creating a totally made up world, really.
Well, you're allowed to do that.
I know.
Everybody's stopping you.
I've been unsuccessfully working on it, apparently.
Well, I think the verdict's still out. I mean, so I don't think you should be deciding that yet. So, how about you, Dylan?
I borrow, like, I'll take my emotional life and I'll use it like I'm on the high board, and I'll do it like a big leap into the messiness of writing from emotions that I've felt. But my life is nothing like Rainey's life or Leah's life, from my books at all. But the emotions are emotions I've felt in some way or another. Metaphorically, there's truth that comes out of my life. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I remember being in a panel on First Fiction after Janet Fitch wrote White Oleander, and she said something like, 50% of a first novel is true, but it's emotional truth. It's not factual truth. Or, and later in the same panel, I think she said, well, half of what's in a first novel is probably true, but it's that what part that is between you and your therapist. Mm-hmm. And so I feel identify with that. And then the other thing is I milk all the weird shit that I've learned in my life. Like, I used to work in a rat lab.
Oh, wow.
So everything I know about working with rats in a lab has been in my fiction. Everything I know about my mother, everything I know about decorating, staging houses, it's all in there.
I mean, isn't that all this, like the stories? We have a repository of stories that happen to us that are mostly outrageous, like Angela's life, where it's sort of like, I can't believe this happened to me, and those become outrageous fiction. I don't know. Bryan, you were going to say something earlier and we all cut you off. So I'm going to let you talk now.
I mean, on this point though, in terms of, using your real life, absolutely, so much. Over the years, I've tried to figure out what's right. What can you incorporate? What can't you? And I've, vacillated between many different points of view. But an interesting thing is I'm sitting thinking about that happened to me maybe about 10 years ago, as I started writing essays. And the essays turned out to be more emotionally informed and more emotionally available than the fiction ever was.
Really?
And the fiction that I wrote after being at Columbia and spending a lot of years, writing I've written a lot of novels that do a really good job of taking up space on my hard drive.
I have some of those.
Really great for that.
Yeah.
I think the main reason that those didn't connect with people such that they really made their way into the world is that they were all really concerned with being beautiful or being crafted, and they weren't emotionally available. They weren't raw. And I think that about 10 years ago, I started writing essays, mostly just to get stuff out of my head, just to put it down, just to say something that made sense. And what I discovered is that the nonfiction, it's totally the opposite of my experience too, Angela. You said when you were a kid, you read fiction because nonfiction was so boring and seemed so cold. And I wrote nonfiction that was like available and warm, and my fiction was really cold. And then I sort of tried to come back to fiction and just loosen the whole thing up. And that's when I started writing really weird shit in fiction. And I just said, you know what? I'm going to write a story about a kid who when he touches people, he sees how they're going to die. Or
that was definitely weird. Definitely weird.
Weird, right? And the weirdness gave me permission to loosen up and not to not to worry as much about every little word and more about the emotional, resonance of it.
You know what I loved was that moment when he touches her. Like two things came to my mind immediately. A separate piece, that moment when he
that book. It's one of my favorite
when
books.
he touches Phineas, and Phineas like that was like, ooh!
Yeah.
And and then the other thing I thought about was I actually, when my grandfather died, everyone in my family kissed him goodbye, including me, because I was, everyone else did it, so I had to do it too. And there was this, I can't quite describe it, but touching a corpse it's like you never it never leaves you ever. Like you remember that moment. It's just
creepy, but real. I mean, part of the world, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
So wild. So let's circle back and come back to kids. Let's talk a little bit. Just real quick, tell us around how old your kids are, so that we have something. And also, we never asked you, where are you in the world? Since we're on Zoom, like Christina and I are New York, but where are you guys? And how old are your kids? Just FYI, so we know.
I'm in New York City, and my kids are 31. My daughter's going to be 30 tomorrow.
Hey, happy birthday.
My younger one is 26, and I have a new delicious granddaughter named Miriam, who is 2 months old and extremely yummy, I have to say.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's very fun. Were you able to see her? Like, because COVID?
I'm an excellent babysitter, I just have to tell you.
Nice.
So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it's great, actually.
Bryan?
I'm also in New York City. I'm up at 115th Street. Since we have to differentiate New York City, since there's so many of us who are from it. My daughter is 13. My son is 9.
Fun.
And the dog barking in the background is not much.
Dylan?
I'm in Hancock Park, Los Angeles. And my son is 31.
Nice. Super cool. And did you guys all write when your kids were little? Like when they were small, were you still writers and all the things? Do you remember any moments? Like, think back.
It was brutally hard. I mean, I couldn't write unless I had a sitter.
Yeah.
And I remember when I started writing fiction after I took a workshop with Madeleine L'Engle. I was living in New York. I mean, I am a New Yorker.
Yeah.
I'm a New Yorker who spends as much time in LA as I can. And I remember Madeleine telling this room full of 19 people that she had tried to be a really good homemaker and mother, and she would make pies and she would, cook for her kids, but she couldn't get the writing done. And she finally decided that her kids would survive without pie and, good, huge home cooked dinners. And she just said, well, she didn't say, but I mean, she just said, let it all go hang. And she began writing and letting the house get dirty. And she said she was much happier after that. I had to write, which meant I just kind of feel like I botched the motherhood thing a little bit.
Aw.
But
I bet you didn't.
well, I wasn't there as much as I kind of wish I was.
Yeah, but that just means that your kid wasn't a helicoptered parent that constantly had a mother looking over his shoulder or her shoulder.
No whirring blades anywhere in my house.
I mean, we do not judge whether you're parenting. Anybody can be whatever kind of parent. It's not our thing. We just want you to keep writing and whatever that takes to do that, because you can, we had Madeleine L'Engle's granddaughter come and read on our thing. And she's a writer and she worships her grandmother, venerates her. So it's like, maybe her daughter was a little,
that's wonderful,
but her granddaughter's super psyched. So
right.
Maybe time evens everything.
One thing, Dylan, that I think a visual artist friend once told me was she had taken time off, actively been a mother,
right.
set aside her visual art, right? And when her daughter got older, she said to her mom, you were never there. And her mom was like, what do you mean? I set my work aside so that I would be with you. And she was like, no, but you were never there. Killer, right?
Yeah, that's interesting.
There you go.
You know what, kids? You can never do it right. So
That's right.
Right.
There is some wisdom to that.
You did this, you did that wrong. It's like, I know, I probably did a ton of stuff wrong, which is all right. Only. By the way, Dylan, I'm working on this book, which is possibly a novel, but sort of memoirish, and I quoted Madeleine L'Engle, and she said that it's a great quote, and it has to do with identity, so I'm going to share it. And it is, she said that something to the effect of, whatever age you are now is all of the ages you've always been. So the 10-year-old you is still within you, and the 20-year-old you is within you, and the 30-year-old you is within you. And I think about that in terms of writing. I think about it in terms of life. It certainly applies to all of us, whether you're a writer or not. But I do think of that in terms of identity as a writer. The same person that we were, who was scribbling in notebooks in coffee shops, which is what I was doing back in the day. And now working on a computer, we're still that same person. We may have different modes to use that we're using. We're not using the fabulous pen that we used to love, but we're still that same person.
You can use it to sign the book.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
I just really quick want to throw out a question that came from the audience, if you guys don't mind. It's from Rachel. She loved it. Thank you so much. We've had a lot of very nice, we love this comments, but she would like to know any advice that you may have to younger writers as we move forward through the pandemic. Any pandemic parenting tips?
I actually learned something, and I'm so delighted to find out that I can learn something, not that I can't, but I should have known this a long time ago, which is the Pomodoro method. The Pomodoro method of time, which I love. So sometimes when I want to just work and I don't want to think about it, I don't want to think about what am I working, what am I doing. So you set your timer for 25 minutes and you work, and then you take a 5-minute break, and you have to take the 5-minute break. And then you do 25 minutes and then a 5-minute break, 25 minutes, 5 minutes, 25 minutes, 5 minutes. And then you take a longer break. And you just keep doing that, whether it's for your writing or whether it's for house cleaning or whatever it is. And I have to say, I have found that really useful during the pandemic, because life is just one big blur, right? I mean, just the day and the night, everything blurs. So I like having really discrete chunks of time to work, like 25 minutes. And I know the ding dong goes off and I'm done for that 25 minutes.
At our
I'd
meetups,
love
Pen Apprentice has meetups, and at our meetups, we do try to get everybody to set a weekly goal so that it is a defined weekly goal, so that you have an actual thing that you can notch off that you've done. Like,
I'd like to add two things to the Pomodoro thing, because I'm so glad you raised that. What really makes Pomodoro potent for me is that before each 25-minute segment, you're supposed to set your intention for that segment. And it can be something as small as, I'm going to keep working on what I started before. But if you're sitting down for the first segment, it might be, I'm going to go back to chapter 3 and see what's wrong with the opening, with the dialogue, or whatever it is. And when I do it with people, we say it aloud, but you can also just jot it down and keep it to yourself. And it's great for groups. One of the first things I did when quarantine started was I got 13 writers together from California to Guatemala. I mean, some of them, I didn't bring in the Guatemala guy, but people brought in people, and we met 6 days a week, and we did Pomodoro on Zoom.
Wow.
So it really built, and it was just generative. There was no critiquing, but it builds up pages, and it builds up, if you do it with people, it builds up a kind of connectedness.
That's for sure. There are
very powerful.
Many different writing centers have moved to Zoom write-ins while the writing center is unable to have people come, or just people who are maybe immunocompromised or for some reason cannot bring themselves physically to go into a writing center. But I know that there are many that have, and even from us, we have write-ins that people do at night, that they just open up a Zoom, it's quiet, and the Zoom is open. But just knowing that there are other people that are happy that you're writing, like that are just sort of like, oh, that's good, there's somebody else writing, Bryan, what were you going to say?
I was very interested in what both Angela and Dylan had to say. I think those are great tips, and I was thinking about myself and the different phases I've gone through for what's helped me throughout trying to balance my time. And I'd say to add to that, because there were some times when those type of things helped me, and other times when I think it was so important just to feel like I seized a moment, and I didn't know when it was coming. I couldn't even plan it, especially when my daughter was very young. Naps, right, are so unpredictable, so wonderful, but so unknown, because you don't know how long they'll last. And so I had to be able to seize the moment. And I did something a few times where I said, I'm just going to produce, I did the words a day method, right? And I said, I'm going to try to do 1,000 words a day, or I'm going to try to do, however many. And I did have a period where my wife and I determined that we would take a month, and I would, in the evenings or, a little bit on the weekends, there would be a little more time for me to go away and write. And of course, we would schedule this because we'd try to work around it, because this would meant more that she would have to do to help with this balance. And I had to do it every day. And because we agreed to it, and because it was a joint effort where I felt like I was impacting other people. My wife had to work harder. My daughter didn't get time with me. I was in the room. For me, that pressure worked. For me, that pressure was good. And doing 1,000 words a day or 2,000 words a day and getting a 50,000 word draft done in a month was awesome. Even though the book is now taking up space on the hard drive, it doesn't actually matter in the sense that I tell that story all the time. My friends are so sick of it that, I wrote a novel in a month, and my friend wrote an album at the same time because we were talking back and forth. But it really showed me that that focus and effort could sustain over time, give me enough to work with that I felt like I was doing something. Even if in the end, the book didn't go anywhere, I still felt like I was true to what I wanted to try to do. And those ideas cycled back around, right? And they've meant something.
I think it's so important for parents, especially, to know that they can change. Like, you can do something and it'll work for 2 months and then it won't work anymore. And that's okay. It worked for 2 months. Now we figure something else out. Like, it happens with parenting too, like where you get your kid to do something and it's really working for a month. And like you said, with the nap times being so, like, all of a sudden everything was working and now it's not. Right. That ability to sort of accept that something isn't working right now that was working really well, it doesn't mean that it was wrong. It means that now we had to try something new. And what's beautiful is that we do have the internet with like Pomodoro and Words a Day and NaNoWriMo and write-ins and prompts. There's like a million prompts. There's so many resources that when you get stuck, you can actually look up like, what are the 50 ways to get yourself starting writing again? And there's probably a blog that does one a day. Like, I'm sure that there's, and I think giving ourselves the permission to do that is so important. Listen, I think we have time for one more question. I was wondering if you have any, like, not advice so much, but as like a good story of something that worked for you, that like as a writer, maybe that has to do with your kids, but maybe not, but just something that just was like an aha moment that was so great that made you feel good. Either with your current book, like you were stuck and then you got it. Anything?
I went into writing essays sort of like you, Bryan. I was writing fiction, wasn't getting it published. I had an idea for an essay. I suggested it and it was published, and it was such a nice thing to get something published, 1,000 words, I got paid for it. Wow. Yeah. So I feel like to your point, what you were just saying, which is you're allowed to pivot. You're allowed to pivot and be a different kind of a writer. You're allowed to be Stacey Abrams and also write romances. You're allowed to do any number of things. So don't put yourself in a box, because you're, in terms of identity, nobody's really putting you in a box. If you're putting yourself in a box, that's your issue. That's not anybody else's issue,
Good.
I think that's really true. My version of that, when I was thinking about identity, was that it helped me getting through the pandemic for a long time to have as many identities as possible. Too many, because I ended up having to just crawl into a cave for a while and disconnect from the internet. But I was writing in different genres. I was making art. I was dancing. I was trying to learn certain steps, which I utterly failed to learn. I was doing yoga with Adrian and Adrian's dog. Yeah. I was, did I just say Spanish? Studying Spanish? If you name it, I was trying to figure out how to do it. And I was dabbling with cooking, which is not something I've ever quite got down. And this went on for the bulk of the year. And then I just was like, no, I'm disconnecting. I'm pulling the plug. But it was great. It helped me to have all these identities for a while and to realize exactly what Angela said. What box? I could step out of that.
Just to throw in my 2 cents on this, echoing both Angela and Dylan. I think for me, especially trying to figure out what to write, how to, where to focus my time and my stories. I really admired so many writers, and really this passion for these different authors and their style and their panache, whatever they had. And like, it was so hard for me not to emulate them, not to rewrite them. And when I was at Columbia, Christina, one of my thesis instructors said very pointedly, he said, you have to kill your masters. Kill your masters. And I was like, this is terrible. You're a terrible person. Why are you telling me that? And he was totally right. I was so enamored of William Faulkner and Cormac McCarthy and Graham Greene, and like I can throw out all these names of these writers who were toxically, themselves, and just got to step away from it all. And it took me decades to do it. But when I did it, and I was like, I'm just going to be weird and just write some stuff. It's so much better.
Tough.
That was definitely, I'm going to remember that story. It was awesome. So I have one quick question. Maybe this isn't true for you. When I was growing up, I remember reading a book that kind of made me realize, oh, I can be a writer. I'm a writer. And that book was Gish Jen's Typical American. So I didn't know, did any of you have an experience like that when you were reading, or was it a different moment altogether?
I did. Prisoner's Dilemma. When I read the Richard Powers, I was like, oh, that's my life. I could do that. I could write like that. And of course I can't possibly write like that, but amazing. Like, I was like, good.
Yeah.
I think I just always wanted to be a writer because, I don't know, I just really always loved reading, and it didn't seem so difficult to make up stories. Of course, thank God I didn't know how wrong I was, because otherwise I would never have done anything. But it's funny because really Little House on the Prairie were like my formative years. I loved those books and I reread them. And who knows why you identify with a book. I mean, it was, I kind of was Little House on the Prairie, quite frankly, but not in the 1800s and the 1900s,
I'm sure Laura wasn't allowed to wear makeup either.
No.
I think Paul would have had an issue with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Violently so. I was always so envious of people who had those moments or who believed that they could become writers. I was quite sure I could never possibly achieve such a thing, that you had to be like tapped with a wand, So that's how I ended up in a rat lab. I knew I could do dreadful things in the name of scientific research, but how you would write something. And then I became a secretary in an ad agency in the very early 80s, like 1980 probably. And I would type ad copy that someone else wrote, and then it would appear in these beautiful glossy ads that would get framed and I had this weird sensation of I typed that sentence, and it's in print. And I know how dumb that sounds. I typed it and it's in print and framed on the wall. But I got kind of ambitious from that, and I took a class in copywriting, and then I wrote an essay about the class for this trade journal called Advertising Age. And they took it, and this crazy ambitious thing seized me. And so I thought, well, maybe I could become a reporter. And that's what happened. But a novel? I didn't think I could ever write a novel. Jeez. No.
See, and here you are with books and books. And
not novels and novels and really slow.
Yeah, we have novels and a half.
It's happening.
Anyway, our time has come to an end. I want to tell everybody in the viewing audience, thank you for watching all the way to the end. We love you. And please come back on April 13th, which is a Tuesday, because we're always on the second Tuesday. You can mark your calendar forever. On Tuesday, April 13th, we have the theme Love and Loss. And we are having Marian Winnick, Melanie Hatter, Marion Fontana are our three authors, and we are super excited. Also, I want to say hi to Bryan Van Dyke from Gordon Haber, and Aaron Hamburger, and Michelle DeMarco, and Lisa Teasley, and let's see who else I can
Rachel
Himsel, and so hi, thanks for watching, and we will see you hopefully all in a month. Thank you so much to Angela, Dylan, and Brian, and bye.
Thanks so much.